Welcome to another episode of The Inquisitive Analyst. I'm your host, Marcus Utikang. It's the show where we chat about business analysis and project management issues and the challenges and triumphs within those fields. It's inspiring, informative, and very much inquisitive. Sometimes I like to talk about issues on the periphery of business analysis and project management, like my guest today. My guest today is a networking coach, an advisor, an author, a TEDx speaker, and executive consultant. She's all about career development and leadership. So please help me welcome to today's show, joining us all the way from Oklahoma, Kari Mirabal. Welcome, Kari.
Hello. Thank you. It's good to be here.
Fantastic to have you. I thought I'd ask you a few questions about career networking, obviously, or networking in particular, because it's something that business analysts and project managers definitely need to do. So let's start off by asking, how did you first get into networking and career coaching?
Right. So I love this question because people are usually surprised to hear that I hated networking. I cut my teeth early in a business, in a telecommunications company, before the internet, before social media. Now I get to tell your audience how old I am, right? And at the time I was in a young leadership group and they wanted us to go out and talk to strangers and, work on business development. And I loathed it. I would go, I would feel awkward and uncomfortable. I didn't know what to say. And I just felt like I was putting my foot in my mouth and I was looking at the clock, trying to figure out how long do I have to stay? And, that whole rigmarole. And what was interesting was in business, as I started to develop and grow, I got into IT recruiting and I started to learn that this thing that I hated so much might actually be the key to my success because I saw other people doing it and doing it well. And I thought maybe I'm missing something here. So I started becoming a student of the art of networking, and it is an art. It takes a lot of practice and persistence. And once I tapped into a few little strategies that started to work for me and I got my first win, then I started to get a little bit more comfortable. I started working through my fear, and the more I networked, the better I got. And then the better I got, the more return I had, and I was able to help people and people were able to help me. So being in the IT industry, I found that there were a lot of people that they tended to be a little bit more introverted. And I thought, you know what, this is where I'm going to practice my business. This is where I'm going to start because I felt that if you see a need, fill a need. So over time, I began working with a lot of IT professionals. And then in the last several years, that's expanded beyond just the IT industry. But I kind of fell into networking. Because if you had told me that I would be doing this for a living, 15 years ago, I would have thought you were crazy. And so I figured there must be people out there that feel now the way I felt then. And so I feel like my mission is to create a movement to help people work through that the way I did. So that's my beginnings.
Fantastic. Yeah, I know. I kind of relate to when you say you do something that you didn't think you were good at or didn't want to do. And it was the same with me in business analysis. I wanted out. I want nothing to do with it. And the more I went out, the more they pulled me back in, and I'm stuck with it. So, and you get good enough at it that you just embrace it. It's what it is.
Yeah, and I've learned the universe has a plan, and by golly, if that's the plan, it's going to work out. It's one way or the other. Yeah,
that's fantastic. Now, you talk about. I hear you on your website. On your own website, also on your. Some speeches that you've given, all talking about networking smarter. I mean, what does it mean when you say you teach people how to network smarter, and how can we as project managers and business analysts kind of apply these strategies?
Right. So a lot of people feel uncomfortable with networking because they're just kind of willy-nilly. They're just out floating around. They don't really know what they're doing or what they're saying. They don't have a plan. And so I find that can be a huge barrier to people having success in networking. So when I tell people that I'm going to teach them how to network smarter, it means that we work on strategies and practice things like, what do you do when you're at an event versus how do you handle LinkedIn, which is self-directed 24/7 online type of networking, right? So we have strategies and plans for depending on which venue you're in. If you're in a networking event, say after 8 p.m., it can be a little bit more casual and things along those lines. But at the end of the day, networking smarter means, being organized, having a plan, doing your research, kind of knowing who you want to talk to and why. So I have a 3-step strategy that I implement in my program, and it's called plan, connect, and grow. So step 1 of that is plan. Who do you want to talk to and why? And I think kind of having a strategy behind your networking can really help set you up for success. The connection piece is one of the most difficult for people who don't like networking, because that requires you to extend a hand, smile, introduce yourself, send that first message on LinkedIn or whatnot. But you want to make sure you're connecting through the right channel. So I'll give you an example of networking smarter. There are people who have LinkedIn profiles, but they're not active on LinkedIn. So I have clients that will say, well, I messaged them 10 times. They're not responding. It's like, okay, well, maybe we need to switch up the way we're connecting. So while you can use LinkedIn to find the person you're looking to network with, maybe a phone call or a direct email or asking someone to introduce you to that contact might be the smarter way to go about connecting. A lot of people want to blame the tool. LinkedIn doesn't work. It's like, no, LinkedIn works. It's just the human behind the keyboard that has to have the right strategy to reach that person. And then the last part of that is the grow step, which is once you have the connection, you want to stay in touch and you don't want to be a fair weathered friend. So you always want to reach out, hey, how can I help you? How can I reciprocate? Because networking smarter means having opportunities to create mutually beneficial relationships. So there are people out there who take, and they never give, or is networking is it takes and a time for giving and a time for receiving. So when you know that, you can find other people who understand that, the synergy works. So that's networking smarter versus just out there networking and running in circles.
Yeah, I like that. Plan, connect
and grow. And it's interesting because you really want to have an equal division of your time between those 3 areas. So a lot of people that struggle with networking, I find that they're spending 90% of their time planning who they want to talk to, but they're not actually taking that action step, which is to actually reach out to that person and invite them to have a conversation. Because that can be the most intimidating part. But what I find is that when you're authentic, and when you extend yourself out there and you are, intentional about what you're hoping to gain from that relationship or that conversation, you'd be surprised. There's more people that are willing to help than you might think.
Being intentional. I like that.
Yes.
You have to plan. Yeah. Even in project management, they say about 70% of what you do has to do with planning. So if you don't plan, you're not going to be very successful.
Right.
So they say. Now, let's talk a bit about calculated risks. Now, in your work, you suggest that professionals benefit when they take calculated risks to achieve success. I mean, what are some examples of a calculated risk?
Right. When you're networking, a lot of times people will say, one of the things I ask is, what is your BPO? What is your best possible outcome? Well, my goal is to be an executive within such and such company. So a lot of times people think, oh, I'm just going to go right for it and go and reach out to the CEO right away without any other planning. And what I usually recommend is sometimes it's really good to start a little bit lower on the ladder and talk to other people that work within the company to get a feel for the culture. What are the products and services that they represent? Get to know a little bit more about the feel and the lay of the land. And as you're working your way up that ladder and learning more, you're preparing yourself for that best possible outcome, which is to have a conversation with that executive or that high level leader. And that way you can come to the table with value and you're ready. You've got questions, a little bit about what you're doing versus, again, just jumping into it and wasting someone's time. So again, that planning step is super important when it comes to networking. And also being an opportunist is really, really important when it comes to calculated risks. Networking is a very interesting animal because sometimes you're just in the right place at the right time. And as much as I sit here and preach about planning, the truth is sometimes you just have to take a breath and have 10 seconds of courage to see an opportunity that most people miss and jump on it to introduce yourself. I can tell you, I've met some pretty amazing people in some pretty weird places. I might be at Starbucks and I hear people having a conversation. This is a true story. These 2 guys were talking about trying to sell a company and they were struggling. And I actually had a client at the time that was looking to invest in a company. So that's an example of an opportunity right in front of me that I didn't have a bunch of time to plan for, but I knew that I had to be somewhat assertive in going over and introducing myself and saying, excuse me, but I overheard your conversation. I just happen to be in this particular industry. I have a client that's looking to invest, and I heard you mentioning that you're looking to sell your company. Would you be interested in talking a little bit further about this? And interestingly enough, they were, and I put them in touch with my client. And that was an example of being in the right place at the right time. A lot of people let fear kind of hold them back, so they don't take that calculated risk. So you've got to sometimes you just have to go for it in networking too.
That's a fantastic example. And I'm sure when you're talking to them, you're telling them this is the value that I have or my client has to offer versus,
Yes.
what values do. So I think that's definitely quite important. Use value and keep it at the top of your conversation, no doubt. Because
but also I'm sorry to interrupt, Marcus, but it's also a good point to remember that being involved in an inner circle of people that are trusting you, I always think to myself, how can I be of value first? So how can I help others? How can I be a contribution to help the people in my network? And when you put yourself in that mindset, networking is a little less intimidating because you're coming from a spirit of helping versus I want. No, I think that's definitely valuable, no doubt. Don't think about yourself first. Think about what you can give other people, and in return, it'll come back to you in spades. Yes, agreed.
That's quite good. Now, what valuable networking strategies would you offer our audience to help support a successful career transition process, and say whether it's in the unpublished market or say the published job market?
Right. So one of the things that you want to learn most about when you are in the middle of a career transition, I have found in my experience, 20 years working in the IT recruiting experience, is that you really want to have, again, you want to have that plan. We talked about plan, connect, and grow is a good foundation, but doing your research. And a lot of times people go through interviews and think, it's about interrogation, and it's not. The best interviews are conversations. And I always tell my clients that commonality equals likability. And when people like each other, that's when the trust starts to form. And as the trust is building, that's when you start to hear about jobs, particularly in the unpublished job market. And so where do you start? You start with that commonality. So while you're networking, maybe within a company that you really want to work for, you want to figure out, who those players are, who you need to get yourself in front of, but you also need to research and find out what are some things that we have in common. So like, I'm a big baseball fan, say go Cardinals, right? I'm from the St. Louis area. So one of the things I look for when I'm doing research on people that I'm going to be working with or talking to, if they have, for example, on their LinkedIn profile, something about baseball, that they love baseball as well, that is something that I will bring up in conversation naturally. Or maybe they're into supporting charities like myself. I'm on 2 board of directors for companies that I feel very passionate about. And so I'll bring up charitable work, or I'll bring up any type of thing that I see in common from our experience or our education or whatnot. So having that commonality really helps foster productive conversations early. And as that happens, you start to build that connection with the person. And when both people feel relaxed, you'll find that career transition process becomes a little bit more natural. And I think that's the key. I always tell my clients that I work with that are hiring that we really want to focus on hiring character and training skill. And the best way to get to that character is to have conversations that are a little bit outside the black and white of how much experience you have in this and those types of things, and getting to know people a little bit better. So career transition is really about, again, mutually beneficial relationship. So it's not about just, is that company going to like me? But it's also about, is this company a fit for me? And the best way to do that is to network within the company with other people to find out. I used to, years and years ago, I worked with someone who really, really, really wanted to work in the theme park industry, no names. And as we started researching and talking to people who had been in that industry for years, there were some common things that we found out through that exploration. The company didn't pay that well. There were some things on the leadership team that we didn't necessarily align with that we were looking for. Just because the name looks good on a resume, several people complained about similar things in different departments. So when you have that much of a concern, it could be a red flag that maybe that's not the right theme park that we need to be looking at. So then we were able to go out and find other theme parks that were in a similar wheelhouse. So for example, if you're interviewing with McDonald's and you don't necessarily agree with their methodology, their leadership, their culture, or the way they treat their employees, there's always Wendy's, Burger King, right? Many others that are in the same type of field that sometimes people get so laser focused on that one company that they forget about all the other competitors or vendors or subcontractors that they could also explore for career opportunities. And again, that's where networking comes in, is learning about those things before you invest the time in getting the job. And then 6 months later, you're like, oh, I'm miserable. I don't want to work here. Now I'm on the job market again. So I always encourage my clients to measure twice, cut once when it comes to career transition and networking.
I'm sure we've all had those circumstances where we wanted to work with that company so badly and then thought, we can't, or we could.
It's not what we thought. I mean, it's like dating, and we're going to talk about my TED Talk, I'm sure, but in my TED Talk, I talk about the similarities between dating and career transition. And there are really so many things that are similar. When you go on that first interview, it's like the first date. They open the door, flowers, they tell you you smell great and, everything is perfect. Sometimes that's the best it's ever going to be. And so what we want to do is be prepared. And by talking in that situation with the theme park, we had talked to 5 or 6 or 7 people at the time who consistently said, this is an issue. So when my client went into that interview and said, I've been doing my research and I found out this, can you tell me what the company has been doing to rectify this challenge? Boy, did that strike a chord, like this person's done their research, but we were also able to find out, were they aware of this situation? And if so, what were they doing about it? So again, it's that 50-50 balance of we each bring something to the table. Let's make sure that it's right for us, because we don't have to be desperate in our search. We want to be intentional and focused and make sure it's a good fit for us long-term.
Fantastic, intentional and focused. Now, actually, you did mention your TEDx talk, and I just want to mention again, so all about career dating, and you mentioned in that TEDx talk, pushing past fear to connect with confidence. What's that all about? What do you mean by that?
So yes, my TED Talk is career dating. And a lot of people are like, what does that mean? Date at work? No, it doesn't mean that. I'm not a proponent of that. It means that much like in a relationship, even if you're married, you still want to date your spouse. You want to plan that special time. You want to make sure you're bringing your best foot forward and bringing that positive energy and working through challenges. It's the same thing when you are employed or looking for a job. You want to date your career. You always want to look at, am I falling in love with what I do? And if so, how do I do that again and again? And sometimes that means retooling the skills you have in a different way. So I'll give you an example. I was an IT recruiter and I owned a recruiting company for many years. And I loved the work and I'm really good at it, but I started to burn out just a little bit. So I sat down and I thought, what are the things that I enjoy most about recruiting? And come to find out, it was talking to people, helping develop them, using my knowledge to help them create a pathway forward. And so I took all those things and decided to transition from recruiting into career coaching, which transitioned into keynote speaking. So now I travel all over the country and I speak at leadership conferences, sales conferences, career type conferences, women's, you name it, any kind of conference that's interested in career development. And I share that knowledge. So it's about sometimes falling in love with what we do by stepping back and looking at how we can use our skills in different ways to help other people. And then, of course, the fun twist is, what does career transition and dating have in common? And those things include like knowing what you want. You don't have to know exactly what you want to be when you grow up, because I have a lot of clients who are like, I don't know what I want to do. And I'm like, that's okay. What do you enjoy doing? What are you passionate about? Start there and then kind of go from that foundation. And you want to cast a wide net. You want to explore different things. I never thought that I would be interested in telecommunications, for example, but I fell into it and then I became fascinated by the field, and the same with IT. So sometimes you've got to try new things to get different outcomes. And then of course you don't want to settle. So again, if you have your heart set on networking with this particular person, but every time you call, they don't reciprocate, maybe they're rude, maybe they're distracted during the conversation, there are many ways to skin a cat, right? So finding other people that work within that company might be a better avenue, but you have to be willing to get your heart broken a little bit when sometimes we have an expectation and it doesn't always work out. So back to your question about fear, a lot of people fear rejection. That's the number one reason why people are scared to network. And what I always say is the right people and the right opportunities will reject you. And what that means is if the universe does not think that's the right job for you, it's not going to happen no matter what, because maybe there's something better coming down the path and we have to be open to that possibility. Again, if we're networking and we want to meet somebody at at the theme park that we've got our heart set on, but they won't return our calls, they won't talk to us, we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We find a different way to get in. And we have to be willing to face our fear of rejection to be able to do that. So you cannot attach to a particular outcome. You can kind of stay focused on what is the end goal and be open to other people, other companies, other opportunities that are going to come up in that journey. And that's where I think people sometimes miss the mark. They've got their heart set on, I want to work at, SeaWorld, for example, and it's got to be in this department by this timeline. And they put too many restrictions around it versus just kind of going out there and talking and letting the natural flow of networking unfold and be willing to kind of make some mistakes along the way. Lord knows I have failed many times when it comes to networking, but if you learn from it, it's not a failure. So fear is really something to get a look at and figure out what are the barriers that are holding you back so that we can overcome them together. And then you have confidence in the next step. So it's a process for sure.
If they say, if opportunity doesn't knock, then build a door.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Or find another door, right?
Find
Another way in.
Yes. That's how it is. Now, you tell us a bit about your book. You already have the no from the keynote, Naked Networking. What's that book all about?
Right. So Naked Networking is one of my favorite signature keynotes. And what it is, Naked is an acronym for 5 mistakes that people make when they network. So for example, A in Naked stands for afraid. People are afraid to talk to strangers. And why is that? So each one of those represents a specific area that we want to focus on. And I've gathered data from, 20 years of experience working with people and helping them. And I have found that networking can feel kind of awkward and uncomfortable, much like being naked can for some people. So it's really about just being vulnerable and being open to the possibilities. So mostly we talk in the book about what are those mistakes and how do we overcome them? What are the solutions? But really also the underlying premise of you already have the no is that when you think about it, let's go back to my example at Starbucks when I heard those 2 gentlemen talking about that company. What's the worst that would have happened if I had approached them and said, hi, my name is, I represent a client that's looking for what you're possibly selling. Should we connect? The worst thing they could have said to me was, no, we're not interested. Okay, that's the same answer I had before I approached the table. So if I already had the no, why not go for it? Because there's a 50-50 chance that they might have said, yes, we are interested, which is what happened. And I was able to create a connection to be of value to my network. So I always encourage everyone before they turn away or walk away from an opportunity that might be right in front of them is to ask themselves, you already have the no. So what do you have to lose? That's my whole gist. Yes.
I like that. Yeah. Actually, I was interviewing Andy Kaufman and he quoted your book.
Yes.
So
love Andy.
So I said, I got to get Kari on my show. That's fantastic.
Yes. Good guy. Good guy.
Awesome guy.
It's so funny. It's funny how networking, we've been doing it since the beginning of time. Think about it. How can we work with other people to get from point A to point B faster? Networking is not new, but some of the strategies and tools and platforms like LinkedIn are new, and those things are always evolving. So it's a life skill, and it's a skill that I encourage your audience to always be thinking about, not only for themselves, but also for their friends and their family and their kids. I have 2 boys, and they have both been on LinkedIn since they were about 15. And now they've each got hundreds and hundreds of connections, and they're working their network differently. But it's funny, my younger son, Marcus, he always says, mom's making us network again. So he doesn't realize it at this age, at this point, but he's subconsciously learning about the art of connecting with people. And I think that's a life skill that we should be teaching our kids now, so that when they become adults in the workplace, they are a little bit more comfortable with the process.
Yeah, some people have to learn that skill. Some people are just born with it, no doubt. So if
Yeah.
anyone wants to get in touch with you regarding not just individual coaching, but also maybe even perhaps to book or to present a keynote or masterclass, how can they do so?
Absolutely. So you can go to my website, www.karimirabal.com. And there are all kinds of resources and information and video links, and you can reach out there and let us know what your questions are, and we'll be in touch.
Fantastic. It's been a wonderful pleasure having you on the show, Kari. I know we've been chatting for a while. I said, I gotta get this lady on my show. Finally got on the show. So thanks for dropping by. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Marcus. And thanks to your audience as well.
Okay, you're very welcome. Have yourself a wonderful day in Oklahoma.
Thank you.
All right, take care. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
And now a word from our sponsors. The Lewis Institute provides an enterprise project management program that does more than just train PMs. It helps support them from the CEO level on down. These courses help certify project leaders and prepare them to pass the PMP exam. The Business Agility Institute provides Emergence, the Journal of Business Agility. This quarterly publication brings you inspiring stories from the most innovative companies. Use the promo code ANALYST to get a 10% discount on your annual subscription.